When we assemble the program for each year's Celebración de Excelencia, it is a privilege to look out on the talent which is in the Latino community and to those who have stepped forward in education. This evening, it is a personal privilege for Deborah and myself to introduce a colleague who in every aspect of her career is a model for what it is we want to see grow across this country. As I have been saying with many of the introductions, this leader that I have the privilege of bringing to your attention, Juliet Garcia, is homegrown. She grew up in Brownsville, Texas, and she planted her flag in Brownsville, Texas. And the community, the institution, the state, the country is better for it. In 1986, when she was named president of Texas Southmost College, the institution has an appropriate name. It is at the very most southern part of Texas. She was the first Mexican-American woman ever appointed to be a college president. In her tenure, she then encompassed the University of Texas at Brownsville. And in her years in its leadership, was responsible for 35,000 degrees and certificates awarded. If you've ever talked to her, you will hear an abundance of stories about the talent and drive that is Brownsville. I don't know too much about chess, but ever since I've met Juliet, my goodness have I learned about what happens in Brownsville, Texas, with the chess students there. Not only is it powerful that you've got these little ones playing chess, but that their ambitions in terms of being good at chess has opened up their avenues for activities throughout the country. They have bragging rights of national levels. Take that same kind of energy and apply it to the world of physics. Who knew? Brownsville, Texas. Physics, again, a powerhouse, both in terms of its academic programs and what I hope she will tell us a little bit about in terms of its capacity to be a center for what will happen in physics in this country, in this hemisphere, perhaps in the world. That kind of aspiration and that kind of pride in her community, and I mean that in every way, that place of the world that she calls home, has brought her to national attention because not only is it outstanding academically, but it is inspiring because it is built on a plain stage, on bare ground. And that's what education's about. How do we make it happen for all of us? That is what Juliet Garcia has done in Brownsville, Texas. It has caused her national reputation and recognition. Fortune magazine, 50's Greatest Leaders, American Council on Education Lifetime Achievement Award, and on and on. Being a Longhorn, I think the fact that the UT system also acknowledged that kind of effort, that not only in terms of her inspired choice to allow the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley to be born and have it be an institution that would be part of the UT system. For anyone in higher education, that's not a step that's easily done, to step aside to let great things happen. But that the University of Texas system has recognized, don't let that talent get away. And so what they have done, appointed her executive director of the Institute, I'm going to say it in Spanish, de las Américas. Con eso, I introduce our keynote speaker, Juliet Garcia.
Well, that was pretty much my speech, so it is a great pleasure to be here with you this evening. I thank you, and I applaud all of the winners that are here. It is extraordinary, and it's inspiring for all of us to watch what you're doing. I'd like to also thank my colleague and friends, Sarita and Deborah, as we all join to commemorate the work that they have done over the last 10 years. Felicidades to both of you, and to all of you with Excelencia for your vision, understanding how important it was to highlight those programs that are having success with Latino population in our country. But vision without hard work by itself would not have been enough. And the work that has gone on over the last few years here at Excelencia to highlight the work that is done all over the nation is really what is most inspiring for all of us. So I thank the board for your commitment, your vision, understanding how important it was not only to highlight the programs, but to maneuver all of the Washington, D.C. Challenges, to stand up an organization, to recruit and organize expert and dedicated professionals, and then to withstand the political winds and tough economic realities of doing business in D.C. You have chosen an important public purpose, and I join many others here today in great admiration of your important work. Happy 10th anniversary, Excelencia. If in a democracy, the public, not only the rich, not only the elite, but the common woman or man does not have access to quality public higher education, that democracy will not be sustained. But if there is, and if we fling open the doors of a college education to all who wish to achieve it, we produce a new generation of Americans, of people proud of their destiny here in the United States, people who will vote and who will volunteer, highly educated citizens, once vested in our country's democracy, will nurture it, they'll protect it, they'll defend it, they'll develop and evolve it, and then they will sustain it. Every one of you here today is involved, therefore, in sustaining the democracy of this country. I cannot imagine any more important work in which to spend our lives. I'm certain that many of you remember hearing the words that went something like this: to those who much is given, much is expected. It's biblical in its origins for many. John F. Kennedy was also fond of quoting it, but for me it was from my mother that I first heard those words. I was in 4th grade. I learned how to spell Mediterranean and was the winner of a spelling bee. I made the mistake of coming home and telling my mother that I had won the spelling bee. And she looked at me with great awe and reverence. And she said, to those much is given, much is expected. I said, Mother, it was a spelling bee. She said, no, mijita. Now you have to think very hard about how you're going to use whatever gifts you have been given for the good of others. How many times have every one of you in this audience told yourself, I'm not going to get involved in one more thing, not in one more issue? So you go to a meeting and you almost have to tape your mouth shut to keep from getting into the conversation. You succeed for the first few minutes, perhaps even for the first hour or so, and then you fall in. You find yourself right in the middle, once again, of the discussion, trying to help solve the problem, and by the end of the meeting, you're in charge. You have made a choice to be a participant, not a spectator. I learned to become an advocate also from my very first teacher, my mother. But this work of advocacy and responsibility is very, very hard. It's hard to sustain over time. So what is it that inspires us to continue it? In fact, in many cases, not only to continue, to devote our entire lives to it. I was inspired very early on by a young mother and her 2 children. In 1987, when I was a baby president, Lou, and I think you and I were baby presidents about the same time, we passed for the first time ever a general obligation bond to restore historic buildings on our campus, to double the size of the library, and build much-needed classrooms. It had been the first time in the history of this college that the people of the college district had been asked to vote to tax themselves in order to grow opportunity for their children. I remember being Belle at a Saks summer meeting, and telling colleague presidents that I would be unable to attend their December meeting because that's when we were going to hold the election. They looked at me sadly. One even said, "This is professional suicide, kid. To ask for a tax increase so soon, first year of your tenure as president?" I'll not ever forget his words. I worried about them. But all I could think of was, when should we do it? How long should a community delay to create an opportunity for themselves and the next generation? I thought we'd waited long enough, and that it was our responsibility to move forward, not to delay one more year or one more generation. We won the election, not by a great many votes, but it didn't matter, did it? Once you win, you passed. And immediately we began to grow the campus. The momentum for growth had begun and never stopped since. The next year, another opportunity surfaced because, after all, what good is it to have a beautiful campus with new buildings if students aren't prepared to go to college when they get there? I had been an academic dean for 5 years before I became president. I had heard from the faculty, and I had seen the numbers, Deborah. The numbers don't lie. Students were taking and failing college algebra at over 60%. We knew we needed to do something to move students toward a more rigorous and disciplined preparation if they were to succeed. So we decided to help guide students toward taking these more rigorous courses, beginning in the 9th grade. And if they did so and made A's and B's in those courses, they would be earning scholarship dollars, good for tuition and fees when they arrived on our campus. Now remember, some of you were not born yet. This was 1987, before states were requiring a college preparatory curriculum. It was also a time that it was unheard of for a community college to raise money for scholarships or to establish, as we were proposing, an endowment scholarship. So we heard about a challenge grant from the Department of Education. The way it worked was that the federal government would challenge the college to raise $1 million in 18 months. If the $1 million was raised, the Department of Education would match it with an additional $2 million. Unfortunately, before you go running to your computer tonight to look up that program, it no longer exists. It needs to. But at any rate, so they would match it with an additional $2 million. The total of the $3 million would become the corpus of this endowment. Half of the interest that it generated would be spent on scholarships. The other half would be reinvested to grow the corpus of the endowment. So we heard about this challenge grant, and we decided that what I was telling you was, if you didn't raise the $1 million in 18 months, you got no match at all. So the risk was very, very high. If, however, we not only would not make the $1 million in those years, we could not reapply for a similar grant for 10 years. So it was our one chance. Where else were we going to be able to triple our money so quickly for such an important need? So we took it. Now, the federal grant allowed the college the option to attempt to raise a smaller amount than $1 million. It would have been easier, would have had accomplished, but it would not have accomplished the goal because we had so many kids in 9th grade. So we dismissed the safer route. We decided to take the full challenge. The community district that we serve is one of the poorest in the region of the United States, a region that had double-digit unemployment and where a quarter of the people had less than a 5th grade education. But we decided to forge ahead. So college officials, board members, dedicated volunteers, everyone began to work on this project. We hit every service club, every organization. Remember, we had just hit them up for doubling their tax rate the previous year. We were lucky to get in the door to be able to talk to them. We talked to every businessman and woman, every carpenter, every lawyer, every doctor, every plumber had now heard about the Challenge for Excellence Fund. Every staff member in our physical facilities department pledged to give us $100 over the 18-month period. It came out of their bi-weekly paychecks at $1.85. They, more than most, knew what it meant not to have an education. The community raised money by sponsoring events ranging from bake sales, pancake breakfast, to black tie dinners in bank lobbies. golf tournaments, and the ever-present car wash. I spoke at every service club that would have me, Rotaries, Kiwanis, Elks, all the animal clubs, lions, tigers. If the Republican women gave us money, we put their picture in the paper. The next day, the Democratic women were calling us with a donation. Now, major gifts were harder to come by, so we traveled to Houston and to Dallas. People had no clue who we were, and we just went on pretending we were somebody and they should listen to us. There we raised a few $50,000 gifts and $100,000 gifts. One day I received a call from an elementary school principal located just a couple of blocks from our campus. She was very upset at me. And she told me that her children were not buying their lunches. Now somehow I couldn't figure out why that was my fault. But she said that it seemed that the children had heard about the scholarship drive and they were saving their money to donate to the endowment. I went to Longoria Elementary School and received a jar. You know those huge, big jars that they have in cafeterias, like with mayonnaise in them, full of nickels and dimes. I asked the children if they knew why they were raising the money. They said, yes, ma'am, so that we can go to college. With a deadline a week away, we were still short of our goal. Now, I had seen the Jerry Lewis telethon. Remember the Jerry? Well, I figured if Jerry can do it, so can we. And in those days, we didn't have lots of television channels, right? So we decided to get on television, and we bought some advertisement. They gave us, they doubled it for us. And so we got some of our alumni, young men, young women who are now doctors or teachers, who had done well as a result of going to college, and they helped us on the appeal. They talked of having an education and what it had meant to them. The first day of the television appeals, we're all waiting in all the offices there by the phones, waiting just like Jerry for them to ring. No phone rang. We ate our pizza and went home. But the second and the third and the fourth days, the phones started ringing. And then they rang nonstop until the final day. The last day before the deadline, the media started to make their way to my office. They had been following this 18-month saga. And after all, it's their job to report on public failures. And this one had all the trappings of a very big public failure about to occur. On the last day before the deadline, many of us were gathered in my office trying to figure out where to get just a little bit more money. When a lady came up the front steps to my office, she had a baby in her arms, and she had a baby in her stroller. This was June, in the middle of summer in Brownsville, Texas. That means it's very hot and very steamy. She told us she had walked from her home in Hortensia Street, which was about 10 blocks from the campus. When she saw the cameras and the media, she was taken aback and started to leave. Someone noticed her leaving and suggested that I go out and talk to her, so I did. As I met up with her outside, she began to take something out of her pocket. I could see that it was a bill of some sort. Now remember, by this time, I had taken money from everybody. I was no longer humble, no longer apologetic. I knew that we had a good idea, and I was convinced that people needed to help us. The young mother took that bill from out of her pocket. It was wrinkled. You know when you have money and you just kind of stick it in your pocket for a minute, it gets kind of crinkled up. She didn't want to give it to me that way. So with her baby still in her arms and the other in the stroller, she used her other hand to try to iron the wrinkles out of the bill before giving it to me. It was a $5 bill. The whole time she was talking to me, she was trying to iron the wrinkles out of the bill. Now, I had taken money from everybody, but I knew that this lady needed that $5 much more than I did. So in Spanish, I asked her why she was giving me the money. And she said, "It is the only hope that I have for my babies." Later that day, we met our goal of raising the $1 million. Since then, more than 13,000 students have been awarded over $4 million of scholarships at this community college, and the corpus of that fund has grown to over $8 million. That young mother taught me and taught us a great lesson. That's why we do this work, because often our work is the only hope that people have. And whenever in my career I might be tempted to kind of sit back and coast a little bit, I would receive yet another reminder of my obligation. And so I say to you today, as long as you're the only Latina at the table, or as long as you're the only Latino, or you're only African American at the table, or only woman at the table, our responsibility is to speak for those that are still not there. UT Brownsville has been known especially for two stellar programs that Sarita already mentioned. One is chess, and if I had 5 more minutes, I'd tell you the whole chess story, and the other is physics. This year, Brownsville was named the chess capital of the United States because thousands of kids, not one team, not hundreds, thousands of kids are learning how to play chess. When they are 5 years old, they're learning English as a second language and chess at the same time. In 3 months, they are beating their teachers. Their job, teacher's job, is just to launch them, not to make them great chess players, just to launch them on their way. And our university's chess team has competed in the Final Four, not of basketball, in the Final Four of chess, each time to make it, and they have beat Ivy League schools each time to get there. And just last week, we attended the groundbreaking for the world's first commercial launch site for orbital rockets, known as SpaceX, to be built just a few miles from our campus. The physicists that will be hired by SpaceX to track their rockets and develop research and commercialization opportunities will come from UT Brownsville. Because of all the universities in the nation, we are now among the top 10 in the production of Latino physics majors. Now soon, this story is just beginning, because very soon you won't hear about UT Brownsville anymore, because we worked very hard to create yet another evolutionary stage for public higher education in South Texas. A new university will begin this next summer, combining the assets of UT Brownsville with UT Pan American. It will be known as UT Rio Grande Valley. And I'm sure it will be known for many new initiatives. And the provost of this new university just happens to be in the audience tonight. So I would like to introduce to you Dr. Javidan Rodriguez. I am confident that among the many new initiatives that UT Rio Grande Valley will have, will continue to be chess and physics. And Javidan, I'll haunt you forever if that's not the case. There is nothing wrong with a human capital in South Texas that a little bit of opportunity and advocacy can't solve. Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person that has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. And you cannot oppress people who are no longer afraid. Cesar Chavez taught us those words. It's our job to teach them to others. Thank you very, very much.